Outside this Thornhill Funeral Home this hour, staff preparations are now ramping up. We just moments ago saw the casket being loaded into the hearse in front of us. And as you can see outside the funeral home, we see more than 30 police officers on motorcycles lined up in formation here on Yonge Street. This, Steph, is sort of the starting point for that procession. A final farewell, a chance for the public, police here to say their goodbyes to Constable Andrew Hong, a 22-year veteran with the Toronto Police Service, a husband and a father to 2 teenagers. So many nearby residents, Steph, are starting to show up here outside the funeral home this morning to pay their respects. Ma'am, tell me your name again, please.
Jane.
Jane, tell me about why you wanted to show up here and see this in person this morning.
We're here to support the Hong family and all the police officers that do such a wonderful job. And it's a beautiful day, and thank goodness for that. We're very pleased to be here. Thank you very much.
You are so visibly emotional right now. This is such a hard time for police officers, for community members, and obviously for his family. Talk me through what you're feeling right now.
I'm very sad for the family, and I'm very sad for the police community, because this kind of tragedy should not happen. It is just inexcusable what has happened here in our society. It makes me very upset.
And we know police have said that Constable Hong was targeted because he was in uniform that day. When you look in front of you and you see dozens of police officers here, how do you feel? What do you want to say to them?
Oh, thank you for your bravery. I mean, it makes me wonder if they're going to be the next target, especially when everyone's gathered so closely. But I'm so happy to see all the protective care. I'm so pleased. We live right here, by the way.
Thank you so much for sharing your time with us. We appreciate this. As Steph, once again, we'll leave you with these live images. This procession is now getting underway outside the funeral home in Thornhill. You're looking at live images right now. A 22-year veteran with the Toronto Police Service now being loaded into the casket and being sent all the way to the Toronto Congress Centre for a funeral service that will happen at noon today. Again, so many people from the nearby community have gathered here to watch this procession begin as it heads to Toronto. Back to you.
Chanel, thank you. And as we're watching Mark Mendelson, the cortege, make its way to the Congress Centre, we can tell you about Andrew Hong's motorcycle that is in this procession right now. And the cortege is featuring a lone charger following the hearse. Now, the lone charger is represented by a single horse or a motorcycle without a rider, with boots reversed in the stirrups, and accompanies the funeral procession. There, we just saw it in that shot seconds ago. So it accompanies the funeral procession. And this is derived from historic cavalry tradition to symbolize the return of fallen soldiers or police officers. And several, as we can see today, TPS Motor Squad members are conducting this missing rider V formation during the procession. That's going to be happening from the funeral home to the Congress Centre in tribute to Andrew. And the formation, it consists of 6 riders. So 1 rider taking the lead in the center position, with 3 riders forming a left flank echelon. And the remaining 2 riders are then forming a right flank echelon, with the second rider position conspicuously empty. So this tradition comes from the missing man aerial salute performed as part of a flypast of aircraft that we've seen mark at funerals or other memorial events. And during this cortege, the 6 officers will act as rolling honorary pallbearers alongside the hearse and the lone charger vehicle, with the 3 riders per side. And these motorcycles will deactivate their emergency lights as a solemn tribute. Now, and you're looking at these shots right now to their fallen colleague. I can't tell if they're deactivated. I guess it looks like they're moving in formation as expected. Now, there's also a scheduled flyover. The Waterloo Warbirds, consisting of several current and retired police officers, will be honoring Constable Hong with a flyover above the Toronto Congress Centre, weather permitting, and so far, so good. We got our chopper up and we can see these beautiful shots. But this flyover is going to take place at about 9:45 this morning, consisting of 4 planes doing a missing man formation that will signal the start of the cortege.
You'll notice that the officers that are riding with him now, unlike other police funerals, these are the same officers that worked with Andrew Hong every day. The motorcycle unit is a very tight unit. It's not very large, and it's very tight. These guys work together every single day. And my understanding from people that I've spoken to over the last few days is that they never left his side. They stayed with him in that coffee shop. They rode his motorcycle back to Toronto, and they took turns riding it, so everybody had an opportunity to ride his bike back into the city. And it must be heartbreaking for them, because that's their colleague. Mm-hmm. But it's not just a colleague that, another cop in a uniform. These are officers that have known him his entire career and rode with him every day and had lunch with him every day and probably knew his wife and knew his children, because they are a very, very tight-knit group in the traffic services unit. So it's special for them. I think it's quite an honor for them to be able to do this. It's the last thing they can do for Andrew. So it's good to see. It's a bit heartwarming for me anyways.
So Constable Hong was a level 4 rider, and he was assisting in the delivery of the level 2 course at the time of his death in Peel Region. Can you tell us about that unit, like what level 4 rider might mean, the expertise involved in that?
He was an expert rider. I mean, these are big bikes. These are Harley Davidsons. They weigh over 800 pounds when they're full of fuel. And they perform a very unique service in any policing environment. His role was essentially as an instructor, and that's why he was out in Peel Region assisting in teaching courses with Peel Regional that particular day, and that was the sole reason he was out there. Clearly he loved traffic work and he loved riding that motorcycle because it's not easy work, and he did it for such a long time.
It's interesting to see them make their way along the 407 now in the traffic, the Toronto traffic, backed up in the background. But there are opportunities now for the public to go out and see and pay their respects along the way.
Exactly. There's probably 10 or 15 overpasses along that 407 route as they go westbound, where the public can get on the bridge and have a look and provide their respect as they see fit. And that's good. The OPP will be looking after closing off traffic, so more Toronto officers can actually, make it to the funeral. So the OPP will be looking after that. The OPP will probably be looking after a lot of different areas in the city to take some of that service pressure off of the Toronto Police. But this is the opportunity for the general public, other than watching us, to be able to go on that bridge and pay their respects. As you mentioned earlier, the funeral itself will be private to about 10,000 people, officers and family. But this is their opportunity.
All right, the march is going to begin at Canlan Sports on Martin Grove Road, and this is where we find our G. Yun Lee. G, over to you.
Hi, Stephanie. So the march has just begun. It's being led by the mounted unit, by Toronto Police as well as Hamilton Police. But you can see now just how many officers have showed up here. They started arriving at around 6 a.m. They lined up. You're currently seeing Toronto Police officers right now in this lineup. And this line goes so far back, way past Belfield. And then what you may not see is that at Canlan Sports, across the street from where we are, there are other police units standing by as well, as they will join this line once this gets past us. You can see over this crowd, the Mounties are just standing by and other police units there. And again, we have met officers from all over, Peel, Durham, York. They've all come here, as well as Niagara. You saw that the march was also being led by the pipes and drums units. So again, just huge numbers here. I'm just going to stay quiet for a moment and just let this moment right here breathe for a second. So as you can see, Steph, so many people are here, and we had a chance to speak to some officers. In fact, some of them who knew Constable Hong. Many of them said that he was a gentle giant, a real friend, somebody that was always there for you, and he loved what he did. And, as you heard, the Toronto police community is very tight-knit. In fact, the policing community is very tight-knit, and some of the officers here, it's been an emotional time for them. One officer I spoke to, she says she's been crying all week leading up to this day. One officer said she didn't know if she could come today because she's just too emotional, but she knew she had to come because she wanted to show her support for Constable Hong and his family, and just let them know that their extended family is here and will support them in whatever they need. So again, so many officers right here. So what they're doing is they're marching down south on Martin Grove. They're going to make their way to the Toronto Congress Centre for the funeral of Constable Hong. And again, they're just going through these units right now, a huge number of Toronto police officers here before they reach the other units just across the street from us at Canlan Sports. We also know that OPP are here as well. We saw them pull up in their motorcycles. So once again, a huge tribute to Constable Hong and his 22-year service to Toronto Police. And again, many of the members here just feeling so emotional. Many of them were being reminded of how dangerous their job can be, but also losing a member that was so close to them. So it has been emotional for many of these officers. And Stephanie, once again, we've been standing by here, and you can see this procession is well underway.
Gee, thank you. Well, we've been showing from Chopper 24 these pictures that are just so touching. The lone charger following the hearse, which is represented by a single horse or motorcycle without a rider. The boots are reversed in the stirrups and accompanies the funeral procession. And we've seen the motorcycle squad, do that special V formation along the way, Mark, that is underway.
Yeah, this is a ceremony that they practice, but they never want to have to implement, and now they have to do it. And it's important. It's important to the family. It's important to the service. I mean, you look at the sea of uniforms that that we're getting on camera here now, and
and there's the V formation, and you can see they're missing the one rider on the right-hand side there.
Yeah. It's all heart-wrenching, and when you talk to officers, they'll often say to you that it's not so much the marching or the sea, because they can't see everybody. It's the sound of the bagpipes. That's what always drills all of this home to all these officers. And to this day, the bagpipes still stir you. And yeah, you can see the overhead now. Mm-hmm. You can see the overpasses and people stopping. And and there'll be police out there. There'll be emergency services. There'll be fire services, paramedics, people saluting. Just paying respect. I mean, this is an officer that was just there to help. And this is where we end up today, which is just really tragic and senseless.
As you were saying earlier, while this procession happens and you have the march that goes into the Congress Centre, the funeral is private, hundreds upon hundreds of officers attending, but there is still business to be done, right? The city moves on, and so that's one way, I guess, for emergency services to be able to pause for a moment to show their respects.
Absolutely. People have to work. There are still fires, and there are still people getting sick that require paramedics. And there has to be a level of service out there, because heaven forbid something else major or tragic happens in the next 3 hours, there has to be a response. There has been coordination, I'm quite sure, between the neighboring police services like Peel to the west, Durham to the east, and York to the north, where if there's going to be issues, if they need extra help, those officers will be able to come in. Every officer in Ontario is a peace officer for the province, so it's not a jurisdictional problem. It's a matter of respect and being ready, if the need be. So these are all things that have been coordinated out of that horrible playbook that you never have to enact. Mm-hmm. And again, the playbook is very fluid. Everything that you're seeing here, everything that we're watching from the chopper and from the different camera locations has been cleared, and with the consent of the family. They've gone through it with all of them, and had they said no to one or two different things, that would have changed. But all this is done with the priority of the family's wishes, and that's how it's supposed to be.
We're going to go now to Martin Grove Road and our Christina Tanelia and a look at what is happening at this location. Christina, over to you.
Yeah, Steph. So the march is approaching, and we have officers from various jurisdictions and other emergency personnel lining the street here. You can hear the pipers who also are from various jurisdictions, police jurisdictions, including Toronto Police. I am here with Fire Chief Hugh Doherty. He is with the Northeast Acting Commander with the Toronto Fire Service. And certainly the Toronto Fire Chief, Matthew Pegg, spoke about his relationship, Chief, with Constable Andrew Hong. And I see today what has been, we've been showing this in a beautiful show of support from your team. I'm wondering if you could speak to your contribution today and the support that your team is providing.
Yeah, the Toronto Fire Service is, we have 2 aerials here with our Canadian flag. Also, we have an aerial tower supporting with the shooting the film, and additionally we have 2 pumper crews providing logistical support, and additionally we have our hazmat teams on standby. And it's an honor to support our Toronto Police Services and to pay respect to Constable Hong.
It truly is an honor to be here because, as I've been saying, Chief, the role that you and your team, the Toronto Fire Service does, Toronto Police, emergency personnel, you risk your lives every day when you go out to do your job. There is an inherent risk beyond the risk that some other jobs have. And when one officer is hurt, or in this case, there has been this terrible tragedy, it really, the entire brotherhood and sisterhood feels it.
Yeah, and you know, all the emergency services here in the city, we're honored to serve the citizens of Toronto, but most importantly, we all understand the inherent risks with the jobs and professions we've chosen, and this is a beautiful, beautiful tribute to a police officer in our community who made the ultimate sacrifice.
Thank you so much, Chief. Truly beautiful to see the contribution of your team. Thank you. I'll let us all listen in to the pipers here with the Toronto Police Service.
All right, we're going to go now to our Jian Lee, where the march is set to begin at the Canlan Sports on Martin Grove Road. G, what do you see?
Good morning, Stephanie. So the march is underway. So what you're seeing now is another unit that literally came out of this parking lot at Canlan Sports. And we have seen police from all over. This one that you're looking at right now is Halton Regional Police. A huge turnout from them. So they're now walking down Martin Grove and making their way to the Toronto Congress Centre. And then you can see just across the street, the next unit is now coming through the parking lot, and they will now make their way onto Martin Grove here. So just to give you an idea, we had so many officers lining the street Martin Grove, but what you didn't see were all the officers in the parking lot at Canlan Sports here. So you can see the next unit now marching, and they're going to make their way to Martin Grove here. So again, thousands of police officers from all over came out this morning. Starting at 6 a.m., they locked down this area, closed off the street so that they could gather here. And then, of course, when the procession began, they started heading down southbound on Martin Grove to the Toronto Congress Centre. We had a chance to speak to many officers this morning. Some of them were just simply too emotional to speak on camera. A couple of officers said they didn't even know if they could come today. They've just been crying all week, and it was just too emotional, but they knew that they had to come to show their support for Constable Hong and his family. You are now looking at Peel Regional Police. This is the next unit that is now walking down Martin Grove as we speak. We've seen officers from all over. This procession is being led by the mounted unit, and the mounted unit from Toronto Police, as well as a couple of officers from Hamilton. And then of course then it was the pipes and drums. Now we're seeing some of the different police forces from all over walking down Martin Grove to pay their respects to Constable Hong. You can see this is a huge group, Peel Regional Police here right now. Obviously, this is hitting them very hard because not only did a member of the policing family was killed, but it happened in their area. And so, of course, for many Peel Regional Police officers, this has been an emotional day. So we are standing by. Again, so many officers are here this morning on this very difficult day. And there's another unit, as you can see across the street, making their way to Martin Grove right now. So once again, they are going to make their way to the Toronto Congress Centre to pay their respects to Constable Hong. We'll send it back to you guys.
Thank you, G. The mass bands, they're made up, as G was saying, of visiting pipers and drummers from Toronto Police and surrounding police services. They lead the march, and then the marchers are going to form the guard of honor lining the route. And the procession travels through that honor guard, and that includes members of the Traffic Services Motor Squad, the Mounted Unit, Toronto Police Pipe Band, the Funeral Cortège, the Colour Party, and fellow emergency services members. And the procession will then travel through that guard of honor. Let's go to Steve Ryan, who is standing by at the Congress Centre. And Steve, we know that they've been making arrangements for this for several days now, and just hundreds of officers set to go into that Congress Centre for this private funeral service at noon.
Yeah, Steph, I would expect there will be thousands of officers, both uniform and non-uniform, and civilian members as well, making their way into the Congress Centre. You can see just off in the distance, just east of us, you've got the mounted unit. They are leading the procession, and the bagpipes are being played behind those horses. No matter how long you've been on the job in law enforcement, no matter how much you've seen or everything that you think you've seen, hearing those bagpipes, Steph, just always brings me to my knees, because that is the reality, unfortunately, in many of these situations that I've bared witness to over the years, and that is that these are just men and women, your neighbors, just regular men and women doing extraordinary work. They put on that police uniform, which makes them that much more brave than the average bear, but they're just regular people out doing a job. And the reason why policing works as effectively as it does is, well, let me say this. Bakari asked me a very good question yesterday, a very simple question, but a very poignant question. He said to me, Steve, does this act against this officer cause other officers to fear for their lives that much greater? And my response was, it does not. It causes those officers to fear for the lives of their partners that much more, the community that much more, because in policing, if you are worried about yourself, you're in the wrong profession. What makes policing the profession that it is that when you line up on parade in the morning, afternoon, nights, whatever the shift might be, shoulder to shoulder with those other uniform officers, you know that if you get yourself into a jackpot, you can be afraid, you can be scared, but you can't be hesitant, because the Police Act requires you to go do your duty, do your service. But you know that if you call for help, you know that help is coming. And that's why when one of their own falls in the line of duty, it is absolutely heartbreaking. And you can see the procession is making its way closer to us as this very emotional service gets underway. But I can't stress that enough, Stephanie, that policing is not about yourself. It's not about being afraid. You can be afraid, but you are more afraid for the community that you serve, and you are more afraid for the people that you are riding in the cars or backing up on calls for service rather than yourself. I'll send it back to you.
Thank you, Steve. If we take a look at the cortege now from Chopper 24, they are still on the 407, making their way to Highway 27 will be their next exit. But Mark Mendelson, we've seen along the way the overpasses as expected. They've gone, through Bathurst Street, I gather, through Dufferin, Heel, and they're expected to go through Jane, Western Road, Pine Valley Drive, and Islington. But that's where people can view it. But we've seen a lot of emergency services stop, standing at salute.
Yeah, absolutely. And for the general public, really, the overpasses are really the only access point for most people as they watch this procession go by. You know, and we've seen the pipes and drums, but I also noticed Toronto Fire Services, their pipes and drums were mixed in with the Toronto Police. They were all together. I've seen some uniforms that I believe are part of corrections services. So you have federal jail guards and provincial jail guards. They all coming out for this.
Is this an all-call situation, or you do it? How does the word get out to those services?
They don't have to call anybody.
Yeah.
The call is made to the chief. What do you need? Really, that's at the end of the day, it's a call to the chief. What do you need? What can we bring that'll make things easier for you guys? And this has been going on as long as I can remember. I don't know how many police funerals I've been to. I know that in my 14 years in homicide, I think I was part of investigations of three deaths of officers, and I saw how that machine comes together, and how quickly everybody sort of forms around each other, and you know, nobody's wanting anything. Whatever Toronto Police need, whatever Chief Raymer wants, he will get, and he only has to ask once, if at all. And the same with officers coming. But it is a logistical nightmare to put this together in such a short period of time, because you've got a lot of officers who are not within driving distance of Toronto, who have to have accommodation. And, you know, you have to make arrangements for them, for receptions afterwards, things of that nature. So, you know, they're reaching out to hotels. And, you know, my experience from when I was in homicide, hotels were offering the rooms. How many do you need? And that's what has to happen. And the logistics through airports of getting people here, and also their own services of being able to staff their own police services while they send 15 or 20 or 30 officers from Vancouver or wherever. So it is a logistical mess for a little while. You know, but you know, at the end of the day, this just comes together, and you know, we will see this all day long, and then when it's over, everybody goes back to work.
Let's bring in now our Christina Tenalia. She is on Martin Grove Road, a staging area of sorts for the parade that we have seen today. Christina.
Steph, we're taking a look here now at members of the Ontario Provincial Police. There is the OPP Auxiliary Unit, as well as many others from policing communities. And earlier we saw a massive show of support from members of the Toronto Police Service. Of course, Constable Andrew Hong was a Toronto Police Service member, and the force is massive, some 7,600 full-time and part-time uniform and civilian members. That includes frontline police officers, criminal investigators, community response officers, parking enforcement officers, support staff. There's so many roles and people that go into making the Toronto Police Service and every service. And this is truly a poignant moment for members of any service, whether it is policing, whether it is fire services or emergency personnel. And the people I've been chatting with, and I can even say here as a journalist, truly an honor to be here to witness this show of respect for a member of their community. Because remember, an officer is a member of the community. The job is to serve the community. So this is officers and others paying tribute to what is the ultimate sacrifice. Constable Andrew Hong was on the job grabbing coffee for his colleagues when he was unfortunately caught up in this horrific shooting rampage last week. And it is truly a difficult time for policing communities, because not only Constable Andrew Hong, but last week, Constable Travis Gillespie of the York Region Police Service also killed in a traffic collision due to what is an alleged impaired driver. So what you're looking at now is the march. Officers from various jurisdictions, as they arrive and travel right into the Congress Centre, which is where the funeral will begin at 12 noon. And of course, we can't forget Constable Hong's family, his wife Jenny, his two children, Mia and Alex. According to the agenda, Mia is scheduled to speak in a tribute to her father. Certainly not an easy task, speaking as a young woman on behalf of your father to a crowd of tens of thousands. So truly a brave young woman to deal with this during such a difficult time. So I'm going to leave you with some of these images here. We're taking a look at Peel Regional Police in their traditional uniform, their ceremonial uniform. And of course, Constable Andrew Hong was killed in Mississauga in Peel Region. Certainly a challenging time for all officers, but particularly Toronto Police and Peel Region, here to honor the death of a fallen officer.
Christina, thank you. Just so you know, we are still awaiting a flyover that's going to be honoring Constable Hong. The Waterloo Warbirds, consisting of several current and retired police officers, will be honoring Constable Hong with a flyover above the Toronto Congress Centre, weather permitting, and the weather looks great right now. The flyover is going to take place, was scheduled to take place at about 9:45 this morning, consisting of 4 planes doing a missing man formation. And we will keep an eye out for that. In the meantime, we can see that the cortege is still making its way along the 407 to the Congress Centre. Let's go to our Steve Ryan standing by there. Steve.
Yeah, Steph, I'm going to keep my voice down just a tad because as far as the eye can see, there are police officers dressed in their #1 dress. That's their formal uniforms, and they are waiting for the officer's body to arrive here at the Congress Centre. They've just marched in here in step and have just come at ease and are now just standing, waiting for Andrew's remains to arrive here. Once again, yeah, just men and women doing extraordinary work. Very brave men and women putting on that police uniform. At the end of the day, they're just regular folks. They're not superheroes. We tend to think that they are, but they're not. They're just people that are out every day, day in, day out, answering those calls for service, protecting all of us. And when one of their own falls, it hits like a ton of bricks, and that's what's happening right now. There is a lot from where I'm standing even, I can see a lot of these uniform officers are shedding a tear, and that is because one of their own has fallen doing what they do day in and day out, which is just to respond to calls for service. And Steph, we talked in the last hit, you and I, about a question that Bakari Savage asked me yesterday, and I just thought it was so striking. It was a very simple question, but it was very striking in the sense he asked me, as a result of what happened to Police Constable Dong, does the attitude of police officers change because Officer Hong was executed? And my response was no. They are not more afraid for their own safety. They become more afraid for the safety of their partners, more afraid for the safety of the community that they serve. But as a police officer, if you are afraid for your own safety above everybody else's, you're in the wrong profession. This is what makes these men and women so extraordinary, and this is why when one of them dies in the line of duty, it hits as hard as it does, because it's just regular people doing extraordinary work, and a man lost his life as a result. And for that reason, law enforcement across this continent, for that matter, grieves the loss of this great man. I'll send it back to you.
Steve, thank you. We also have our Gian Lee standing by at the Canlan Sports on Martin Grove Road. And you know what, we're just going to pause and go back to G in a little bit. But, you know, Mark, to Steve's point about the service, how it reacts to something like this, we all saw this unfold on Monday, right, with the first few tweets from the police service, and now there's this incredible investigation that's underway. As a former Toronto Police homicide detective, you probably watched with great interest how they're putting together the pieces of this investigation and what kind of timeline it will take to determine, if ever, why or how this had to happen.
Well, yeah, if ever. That's the magic phrase, Stephanie. We know what happened at the donut shop. There's security video in there. There were customers in the store, so there's no mystery as to what took place there. There really is no mystery as to what took place at the body shop as well, where you know, 2 other people were murdered and other people injured. So from an investigative point of view, those are fairly simple to sort out. The interaction that took place in the cemetery in Hamilton, as we know, is now under the SIU have carriage of that, and you know, people are you know, waiting. Cops are waiting. Public are waiting to find out what the SIU have and have not uncovered. Are we ever going to find out what this man's state of mind was? I highly doubt it. You know, we may never know what the motivation was, what the animus was. As Steve Ryan mentioned earlier, there were efforts to remove Constable Hong's gun, which was unsuccessful. And who knows if other people would have been shot in that donut shop after he got that gun. We just don't know. But right now, that one portion of the investigation under the carriage of the SIU is still out there. And, we've heard chiefs of police, Chief Tanner from Halton, sort of give a nudge to the SIU when they had their press conference last week and essentially saying, guys, let's go. Get this information out. We know there was an interaction. We know there was an exchange of gunfire. But we've got to wait for the SIU's report. And historically, we know that can take an inordinate amount of time. But hopefully, more information will come out. Not going to come out today. So there are, from an investigative point of view, it's not complicated. It's tragic. It's large. You've got a number of different crime scenes that had to be dealt with by Peel, with the assistance of Toronto, with the assistance of the OPP, with the assistance of York. And that's what makes this unique as well. It's not just one police service that's involved. It's Toronto, it's Peel, it's Halton, it's Hamilton. Everybody had a part to play in all of this. So from an administrative, investigative point of view, once the dynamics were sorted out and everybody knew their role, things would work out as they did, and that was pretty seamless.
When the conversations happen about the shooter's past, right,
Yep.
and the criminal record that we've been reporting on, how much does that play a part in the whole mood of what the service is dealing with, right, and going forward in the penal system, et cetera, not to get political, but you see that this person had a big history with law enforcement.
It plays a part. Does it have an impact in how they do their job? No. Does it help to answer some of the questions? No. But does it raise questions? It raises the same questions that have been made in Saskatchewan with the mass murder out there, and how many times this guy was on parole and breached his parole. Well, the same holds true here. And if the questions need to be asked, they need to be asked of the parole board. They need to be asked of probation. People will question the courts. We've heard it so many times. Why was this guy on the street? All of these questions are fair questions. But we do have laws, and judges are bound by precedent. And, we'll find out one day what the mitigating circumstances were in some of these arrests and convictions of this guy, as to why the courts gave out sentences that they did. But at the end of the day, is it going to change anything? No, it's not going to change anything.
Well, Steve was talking about that too, and he said, no, it doesn't change anything or how a police officer does their job, but the whole approach to society has to be altered in some way or another when you're out there, just getting your coffee. Or I know you've always had the training to be alert and aware, but, from this point on, I think, could there have been a shift in the mentality, the defensive mentality of the police service?
It could be. I would hope, and I suspect that it will not impact the way they do their job, but it's going to be weighing on their minds. It's going to be weighing on the minds of their family. I mean, we've seen historically over the last couple of decades, Stephanie, the value of human life has gone down, not just in the killing of police officers, but in the killing of innocent civilians who happen to be in an area of a gang shooting. We've seen it over and over. We talked about it over and over again. And that value has gone down. And everybody owns that, not just the police, not just the politicians, not just the courts. Everybody owns that. And that's unfortunate, but we are a big city. And we are a big city that has a lot of crime. Is it proportional to or comparable to what we see in the States? No. Because we have a country in the States where there are more guns than there are people. We don't have that here. But you still have lots of people legitimately asking questions about the justice system, about sentencing guidelines and structures and things of that nature. And they will be asked over and over again, just as they are in Saskatchewan, just as they were in Nova Scotia, and just as they are here. Do we learn from it? Time will tell.
The Canadian Armed Forces, many members don't travel in uniform for fear of being a target. For a police service member, not necessarily an option now. But if, this, as we understand, the shooter wanted to target a police officer, someone in uniform, what kind of conversations can be had about that, if any? There's a question of transparency, right? You can't have officers. There are plainclothes officers, but in Constable Hong's scenario, not so much. You can't do that.
No, You have, and as we said, you got to have your head on a swivel. But you cannot get paranoid. You cannot live in that world where your horrible event happened, and they will continue to do so. That's their job. That's what they signed up to do, and that's what they'll continue to do.
We're going to go back to Christina Tenelia on Martin Grove Road, where we've been seeing the marchers, the bands go by. What's the latest where you are, Christina? They seem all forming that honor guard now.
Well, and what is happening is that these police forces, as part of their march, are now at a standstill. And when there is a police funeral in any community, it's almost as if the city comes to a standstill to honor the fallen officer. When we take a look at the group here, for example, the Toronto Fire Service is here with this large flag. The Toronto Fire Service, of course, the largest fire service in the country. The Toronto Police Service, same thing, about 7,600 full-time and part-time uniform and civilian members. When you consider the size of these police forces, not to mention other police jurisdictions here, Peel Police, Hamilton, I saw the Hamilton Police Chief, York Region, the OPP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. There is a somber feeling, a feeling of sorrow, but also great honor and respect to be here to honor Constable Andrew Hong and his family. And it's got to be a very difficult but also special moment for his family to see this show of support and to hear the kind messages of condolence about him, described as a gentle giant. We've heard about him from our Steve Ryan, of course, a longtime former homicide detective and staff sergeant. The Toronto Police Fire Chief, Matthew Pegg, spoke about him. I spoke to someone who knew him, who described him as a gentle giant as well, a class act. And perhaps we saw that in his final moment, getting coffee for his colleagues. So this moment may last here for a while. We are right at the foot at the Congress Centre, where the funeral will take place at 12 noon. There will be many tributes made, not only from dignitaries like Toronto Mayor John Tory, Premier Doug Ford, and the current Chief of Police James Raymer, but also we anticipate we will hear from members of Constable Hong's family. His daughter, Mia, a young woman who spoke out on social media about her father, can't imagine how difficult it is for her and her brother Alex, their mother Jenny, to lose her husband and to lose the father of these young children. But this is the thing about a brotherhood and sisterhood like this. They come together in good times and bad, and certainly nobody wants to have to come together in a time like this, but we have seen it, unfortunately, time and time again here in our city, these shows of support, these moments of silence where the city and the police service comes to a standstill to honor a fallen officer. So this is what's happening right now at the foot of the Congress Centre. It may last for some time as we await, at least from my vantage point, to see the procession, the hearse carrying Constable Andrew Hong and his family arriving here at the Congress Centre. So, Steph, this is a moment of reflection for officers and emergency services personnel, and also for the community and people at home to take a moment to think, to say thank you, and to recognize the ultimate sacrifice that members of the police and emergency personnel make every day. Steph, I'll send it back to you.
Thank you, Christina. We see the funeral cortege now on southbound Highway 27, making its way closer to the Toronto Congress Centre. I can just tell you that we know from Toronto's Mayor John Tory that the Toronto sign is going to be dimmed in memory of Constable Andrew Hong, whose life was tragically lost in the line of duty. That a tweet from Toronto Mayor John Tory just a minute or so ago. Our Steve Ryan standing by at the Toronto Congress Centre, where Steve, there's an honor guard in formation for the cortege as it makes its way closer. And these shots are just so beautiful of the tribute, the Canadian flag hanging from a crane of a Toronto fire vehicle, as we see members of the funeral procession there standing guard, an honor guard that is going to be greeting the cortege.
Steph, it's one of the most powerful moments, I think, in our country's history, and that is when we bury one of our law enforcement officers. And I've said this 1,000 times, and I believe that's because of what a police uniform represents. Think of it when we were all kids. We were told if you were scared, if you were frightened, if you were sick, if you were afraid, if you were lost, you find that police officer. And that police officer, no questions asked, is going to help you be safe, to find your way home, to alleviate your concerns. And when that uniform falls, when somebody that lives amongst us in our society takes it upon themselves to kill a police officer just because they're a police officer, it really melts the entire fabric that all law enforcement represents. And I think that is one of the really big reasons why we are all so affected. You don't need to know the officer. I knew Andrew. You don't need to know him to grieve for his loss. You grieve because you were part of that fabric. I was part of that fabric. All of these officers are part of that fabric. And when a piece of that fabric is ripped away, we all grieve collectively, and that's what's going on right now. And Steph, very, very quickly, I was listening to a conversation you had with Mark Mendelson, and if you guys covered this, I apologize for repeating myself, but you were talking about what changes with officers when they go out in a uniform. Well, I can tell you what police officers have never been able to do, even back when I started, and even back when I'm sure Mark started, who was older than I am, by the way. It's when you're in a police uniform, you can't go out to grab a coffee in your white t-shirt and your police pants. You need to have your firearm on if you're going to put that uniform on, because that uniform attracts attention. So you can imagine how brave these men and women are. When you put that uniform on every day, you know whether you've got a herd of cops beside you or you're by yourself getting coffee in a donut shop, you know because of that uniform alone, if it hits the fan, they're looking at you. And Andrew went to get coffee for his colleagues, which is not a surprise to me. He was only there by himself, and he knew, as do all of these officers, that if they are by themselves doing a traffic stop at 3 o'clock in the morning, if it goes south, man, you're by yourself, and you better be prepared to deal with that, knowing full well that while you're dealing with whatever that situation is, your brothers and sisters are coming as quickly as they come to help you. But until they get there, you've got to contain the situation by yourself. That's why these are such extraordinary men and women, and that's why the officer lost his life, is because he was wearing that uniform. And despite the fact that he didn't have his gang, if you will, around him, he went to get coffee for his colleagues by himself, knowing full well that if something did happen, he had to answer the call until his backup arrived. So extraordinary people, heartbreaking day, and my heart aches with all of these officers here who grieve the loss of this great man and this great police officer. Steph, so back to you.
Steve, I know as many as 10,000 police officers from other jurisdictions, Toronto, Peel, obviously the police services involved, expected to attend. Have you had any kind of formal confirmation on that? We can see from our shots from the chopper, from various vantage points along the parade route, that funeral cortege as well, that there are just hundreds upon hundreds of officers there to pay respects.
Oh yes, if there are, I would say upwards of 1,000 or more police officers just milling about in this parking lot here. I saw uniforms as far east as the Maritimes. I saw the Quebec police on motorcycles. There will be American officers here as well, because as I was saying earlier to you, Steph, if one law enforcement officer falls, it affects us all, because regardless of where you police, we're all part of that same fabric. We're all part of that fabric that represents safety and kindness and goodness. And if somebody pokes a hole in that, it affects us all. And that's why it is important for everybody that can be here to be here, because you grieve for the loss of your fallen officer, and you grieve with your brothers and sisters in the policing world as well. And it's a very important time for everybody to say goodbye to this great police officer who will be coming through here, sadly enough, in the next little while. That's for sure. Steph.
Constable Hong served citizens of Toronto for just over 22 years. He began his career at 42 Division before going to traffic services in 2002 as a frontline traffic officer. And then in 2008 is when Marky found his passion in the motor squad, where he'd excel as this police motorcycle instructor. And to talk about that motor squad background, which is playing such a poignant role, right, in the cortege today. In 1908, the Toronto Police Service was one of a few innovative police agencies in North America that started using motorcycles. And since that time, we've learned that 9 motorcycle officers lost their lives in the performance of their duties. The last one was Constable Paul Gosling in 1976. But right now, the TPS has 35 Harley-Davidson Electra Guide motorcycles. Mark, you were saying they're very heavy and they're used for traffic enforcement, collision response, escort duties, public engagement. But they're highly trained officers from level 1 to level 5, which is a master police motorcycle instructor, Constable Hongs.
And he wasn't just an instructor. I mean, he was a specialized traffic services officer, so he was involved in large-scale accident investigations, fatality investigations, helping out with the accident reconstruction units. He had a lot of specialized roles within the traffic services. It wasn't just teaching other officers how to ride the bikes, but it is a very, very tight unit, and it's a very unique unit in traffic services. They stick together, and you can see that they're not going to leave him. They're going to stay.
Yeah. We're going to go to our GN Lee right now. She's at the Canlan Sports on Martin Grove Road. A key point in the procession. G, over to you.
Hi there, Stephanie. Yeah, so as you saw early this morning, police officers from all over started gathering at 6 a.m. and they started to make their way down Martin Grove, southbound to Toronto Congress Centre. I will say I saw police forces from all over. We're talking London, Ontario, Hamilton, Stratford, Simcoe. We even saw a small unit from Buffalo marching in this procession to pay tribute to Constable Hong and to show their support for his family. We also had a chance to speak to several officers this morning, some of them too emotional to speak on camera, but we did speak to a couple of sergeants, one in fact who knew Constable Hong, and here's what they had to say. Well, one sergeant that knew Constable Hong said that he was a gentle giant, one of the nicest guys you could ever meet, was always there for you, not only as a colleague, but as a friend. And then the other sergeant we spoke to said that, this is a sad day. A member of the policing community was killed so senselessly, but it's also a reminder to police how dangerous their job can be. And I remember very clearly one time, our very own Cam Woolley reminded me that there's no such thing as a routine stop or routine stop. That the job is dangerous no matter where you are. So we're just standing by here. We can see something way off into the distance here. We're just looking northbound to Martin Grove. And the motorcycle is coming through, and it looks like there's a procession making its way here. And what will happen is it will pass by Canlan Sports here, where this was a gathering place for police officers early this morning. I can kind of see it off in the distance now. I don't know if you can see, but there's a large motorcade coming down this way. And many of the, this is an industrial area, many of the offices here around here have closed. Because this area has been completely shut down. So just going to stand by here, and Stephanie, I don't know if you can see, I know our Chopper 24 is capturing all of this, but it looks like it's making its way here on Martin Grove.
That's right, G. We can see it from above, from Chopper 24. The cortege is making its way closer to you in the Congress Centre. Mark Mendelson, you've been commenting on some of the people we've seen along the road in uniform.
Yeah, we've seen, just a few moments ago, we saw a bunch of members of the emergency task force. I couldn't make out whether it was Toronto or one of the neighboring forces, but they're all out in their uniforms. The officers that worked with Constable Hong from traffic services and his platoon, they are riding their bikes in the procession now, but we've also seen shots of lots of officers on the side of the road wearing helmets. These are other motorcycle traffic officers from neighboring police services and the OPP who are all there with their bikes, as I would expect, because they are a tight-knit group, all motorcycle officers. And we have a lot of people that we're seeing that are in plain clothes, are in civilian clothes. And these are detectives, these are plainclothes officers that don't necessarily have dress uniforms. But there are also civilians. These are the mechanics, the people that worked on the motorcycles, that had great relationships with the riders, and clerks that worked the front desk, clerical staff that worked at headquarters. All of them, even though they don't carry a gun or wear a uniform, are all still part of this service, and they feel it as much as anybody else, and you know, they're there as well, as they should be. And it's stirring, and you look at the scene of all these officers and all the uniforms from all over the place. We've got auxiliary officers from different police services. These are people who volunteer their time to police services, X number of hours per month, who have taken their day off of work to get into their dress uniforms and come down and pay respects. None of this is surprising. This is what happens. This is what should happen.
And Mark, they're pausing now. We know that there is this honor guard that's going to be formed. Can you explain how that will work as they head into the Congress Centre?
Well, we have the honor guard and the ceremonial unit from the Toronto Police. Where they're going to fit into this situation right now, I'm not quite sure. They may be mustering up right now and walking with the procession from this point on. All of this has been laid out and scripted out, and I assume that with some precision timing, they are right where they want to be right now.
Now it looks like some more traffic motorcycle units moving up, flanking the cortege there.
Yeah, and that could be the remainder of the traffic service officers that weren't part of the actual surrounding of the hearse that will be joining in now. That's pretty normal when it's an officer who is not a traffic officer. You'll find first the platoon that he or she worked with joining on, and then the rest of the members of that particular division or office will be joining in as well. And that's what we're seeing here, sort of the mustering of all these different branches of the police.
So you have the ceremonial honor guard, and then the bands, I guess the Traffic Services Motor Squad, Mounted Unit, Toronto Police Pipe Band, the Funeral Cortège, the Color Party, and fellow emergency services members. The procession is going to travel through that guard of honor. It's the pomp and pageantry and ceremony of this is, as grand as what we've seen in England.
It is, but it's necessary. And here are the planes. There you're seeing these are retired and currently active police officers in the province. They fly out of Kitchener-Waterloo. This is a first. I've never seen this before. This is quite.
These are the Waterloo Warbirds. As you said, several current and retired police officers, and they are honoring Constable Hong with this flyover above the Toronto Congress Centre. 4 planes doing a missing man formation, signaling the start again of the cortege.
Pardon? I said that took some doing.
It's quite a sight.
Yeah, like I said, I've never seen that before at a police funeral, but it is quite something.
And they're circling around again, going over the area. So that's now, we knew this was scheduled to start at about 9:45, the fly past, the flyover. But now we have it happening as that, I guess, after the cortege left the funeral home, made its way down to this general area on Martin Grove, they pause, there's this flyover, and then they start again.
And that has to be coordinated as well, Stephanie, because, remember where we are. We're very, very close to Pearson Airport. And we've got, regular commercial flights coming in and out, and so arrangements have to be made to find a slot for them to do this safely. I'm sure the air traffic controllers in Toronto had no issue in getting cooperation from the airlines and from the pilots to facilitate this.
I know that the Warbirds, the schedule, there were going to be 4 planes doing this missing man formation, but maybe, we see just 2 in this shot, but nevertheless, a dramatic tribute.
Pretty impressive, pretty impressive. And it's especially impressive given that they're serving and retired police officers. That's different, and as it should be. I think it's good.
And off they go.
And off they go.
And here we look now back on the ground at the cortege, which is at a halt, but is expected to start up again at any moment. And everybody in their formation now, making their way into the Congress Centre. So the funeral itself for Constable Hong, the service is going to get underway at 12 noon. But when you've got upwards of 10,000 members of police services attending, this is quite a moment to behold and to organize to get prepared for that service at noon.
Yeah, the coordination is massive, and really it has to be done, with as much precision timing as possible. And again, you've got the family, of Constable Hong, who are, I'm sure, on pins and needles, and going to be doing some extraordinary things at the service itself. Constable Hong's wife and one of his daughters will be speaking. I can't imagine being in that position. That must be just gut-wrenching for them, and so brave.
But we know that the Toronto Police say that they have been working very closely with Constable Hong's family regarding their wishes for the funeral service. And I guess this is a time when the family's been enveloped, right, by support and love and caring from the Toronto Police Service and the other services. What happens now for the family? Of course, in the moments after the tragic death of Constable Hong, I know that there is a unit that's there deployed to help them. This is just the beginning of their tragic realization that Constable Hong is gone.
Yeah, and you bring up a great point, Stephanie. I mean, when I think about all the families of homicide victims that I dealt with over 14 years, one common theme always was when the funeral's over, it's over, and people stop coming. And I know that a lot of people don't come to visit afterwards because they don't know what to say. They don't want to. They feel awkward. They don't want to say the wrong thing and make people upset again. When it comes to a situation like this, you'll find that the Toronto Police Association will be stepping right up. I have, just from my own experience in police officers' murders that I've been involved in, for up to a year after the event, you'll get officers from that officer's platoon or from that division taking their kids to baseball, to hockey, to basketball, picking them up in the morning and driving them to school and bringing them back. And they do it. Cooking meals. Right. Everybody takes a turn. I'm bringing dinner Wednesday, you're bringing dinner Friday. They will not be without support. And that is from his platoon and from the association.
Okay, we're going to bring in Ji Yun Lee right now. Ji, what are you seeing from your vantage point?
Hi there, Stephanie. So the cortege is literally driving by us right now. You can see all these officers on motorcycles. The hearse just passed us. And along the streets here, the few officers that are standing by, they are literally standing and saluting this cortege that is passing by us now. So this is at Martin Grove. We're just south of Belfield, where many of the officers this morning gathered at 6 a.m. This was a mustering point before they joined the procession and made their way to the Toronto Congress Centre. So just a huge turnout. And in fact, many of the businesses here, they shut down for today, but the few employees that did show up, they're coming out, standing by and just witnessing all of this, this incredible show of support for the policing community. It's just pretty incredible to see here right on Martin Grove. And again, I don't know if Matt, my cameraman, could just pan over a bit, but you can see all these officers here right in front of Canlan Sports just saluting as this cortege makes its way down Martin Grove and to the Toronto Congress Centre. Many of these officers here that you see were just trying to control traffic and was just trying to assist all the officers that showed up this morning. So they're standing by here, but obviously wanted to pay tribute. So just an incredible visual here of so many officers. And in fact, earlier today with that procession that you saw that got underway at 9:30, we saw police units from all over. London, Simcoe. We even saw a small unit from Buffalo, New York, walking in that procession from Stratford, Peel, York, and of course Toronto Police. We also saw Toronto paramedics and Toronto Fire walking in massive numbers in that procession to pay tribute once again to Constable Hong and to also let his family know that their extended family is here and they are here to support them in any way possible.
And the hearse
so
just going by Christina Tenalia's location. Christina.
Yeah, Steph, the hearse and the cortege passing us at this moment. A truly solemn moment as police from various jurisdictions stand by and salute Constable Andrew Hong. This cortege includes the motor squad, members of Toronto Police, his family, of course. I want to bring in Harvina, who is here with me, and Harvina works at a neighboring business, came out to pay her respects and take a look at this. And interesting enough, both of your grandfathers were police officers.
Yes, that's
Take me to this moment. How does this feel, this show of respect, Harvina?
Quite frankly, it's awe-inspiring, heart-filling, and absolutely tributary to their fallen comrade. And it's just a testament to what these men and women go through, and they put their lives online every day, day in, day out. And this tribute is basically spine-tingling. It's awe-inspiring, as I mentioned, and I think it's absolutely amazing and necessary for all of us to know the trials and tribulations all of our armed men and women go through.
Absolutely. Very well stated. Thank you so much, Harvina, for sharing that with us. Steph, I'm going to leave this here for a moment so that our viewers at home can take in this moment. The Toronto Police Traffic Services and their motor squad as part of a procession for Constable Andrew Hong.
There's James Raymer, the current chief of police, and standing at attention, giving a salute to the cortege. And we're going to see a transition mark from Chief Raymer to a new chief of police that was announced just, within the last week that there's a new chief of Toronto Police. But there's a sort of a hush and a hold on the new chief out of respect for what is happening today.
And that was the right move, I think, for Deputy Chief Myron Demkew. I mean, Steve Ryan and I both know Jim Raymer well. We both worked with him in homicide as investigators. This is essentially his worst day, and I don't think he ever believed that his quiet transition from chief of police to being retired would have included this. But I think it was the smart move for Deputy Chief Demkew to say, let's just hold off. There's nothing to celebrate here. There'll be time for that later. And the transition will go. It will be fine. We've transitioned from chiefs forever. Mm-hmm. Myron Demkew has had an opportunity to work side by side with Chief Raymer for a long time. So that's going to be secondary. I mean, but if you're the chief of police, this is your worst day as the chief. And I know we're going to have Chris Lewis on later on, mm-hmm. and a former OPP commissioner, and Chris and I have talked about it many times. And there's nothing worse as a chief of police to lose one of your officers. So for Jim Raymer, a bad day. But they'll transition. It will be fine. The police service will go on, and officers will go back to work.
You wonder if it could have an influence on Chief Designate Demkew's term, and how starting with this sort of tragic event in the police service, and how he views what policing is living with right now.
Well, I would think, Myron Demkew's been around 30 plus years. He's been to his share of police funerals as well. Most recently the death of Constable Northrup, which he was at as well. So this will not come as a shock to him. It'll be a learning experience, but he'll learn lessons here that I'm sure he hopes he will never have to use in his time as the chief, because nobody wants to see any of their officers be killed in the line of duty. But it is, it's such a fluid situation. You've got a changing of the organizational structure. You're going to have new deputy chiefs moving in to sort of backfill on the organizational chart. And all of this is taking place in the backdrop of this horrendous, murder of 3 people, one of them being a police officer. And this event, which is, as we've said before, is overwhelming. But, they've been there before. The system is designed to continue seamlessly when there's a changing of the guard and when there are tragic incidents like this. And I know that sounds shallow and cold, but it's a reality.
And now we see that the hearse is paused at the Congress Center, and we await the next steps as the cortege has gone through the honor guard, and we know, again, the funeral is to get underway at 12 noon. Our Steve Ryan is standing by at the Congress Center, and I'm not sure if Steve's available at this point to talk, but some family members going in right now. We know that Constable Hong is survived by his wife Jenny, 17-year-old daughter Mia, and 15-year-old son Alex. And his wife and Mia will be speaking at the funeral, give a tribute at the service today.
Yeah, I can't imagine the strength that it takes to do that. I mean, I just can't imagine. You even look at the faces of the ceremonial guard, the ceremonial officers, you know, and they go to funerals all the time, and that's not what it was designed for. It was designed and created by then Chief McCormick, you know, with the pomp and circumstance of these of large events. But to be able to stand there and be as stoic as they are is pretty impressive.
It's amazing how people find strength in tragic times.
Well, you find strength in numbers, Stephanie. You look around, you look to your left, your right, in front of you and behind you, and you see people who are, you know, essentially in the same boat, in the same occupation, and have lived, you know, basically the same experiences. But when you see the families, this is when it all comes home. I know for me, and in all the years that I've been going to police funerals, for me it was always when you see the kids. That's what really throws you, when you see the children, the officers, and you know, and sometimes they're young, and they're overwhelmed. They don't realize what's going on. They won't realize for years, but it's important that they know that they're not alone.
For Mia to be speaking today at 17, you know, to honor a beloved father, but do it in front of a stage, on a stage such as this, is just, it's remarkable that anybody would be able to pull that together.
Oh, to keep that together is just strength beyond belief.
So we have some information from the Toronto Police Service about some honorary positions here during this service.
Well, the ceremonial unit is always involved in these events, and we have some honorary pallbearers, and one is from the Canadian Air Force, Captain Kim, who I'm going to assume is a friend of the family, and we also have Detective Shoboy from Traffic Services, who I would suspect was a partner of his, a colleague of his, and somebody. He was chosen, and then you have the hat bearer. These are all people that he worked with every day. And we're going to hear from Matt Moyer, who is his acting superintendent, who I'm sure knew him as well as anybody. But you know, there'll be the medal bearer, there'll be the hat bearer. All these things are just going to be gut-wrenching for everybody.
And we know that Constable Hong also survived by his parents.
Yeah, the old saying, "You're not supposed to bury your children," does not always hold true.
You can see the anguish on their faces. Our Steve Ryan is there at the Congress Center. Steve, over to you.
Wow, well, Steph, I'm talking very low because the officers are marching past me as they're going to make their way into the Congress Center. A lot of tears. I can see that there's a lot of tears and head nods as they walk by. What strikes me the most, buddy? What strikes me the most about being here is that you look at all these faces of these men and women in these uniforms. Strip away the fancy uniforms. Strip away your superintendent's gold flashes or the fancy hats, the polished boots. These are just community members. These are just men and women who chose this as their job. They're not superheroes. I know it's very convenient or easy to think that police uniform is a superhero's uniform that stops bullets and speeding trains, and it doesn't. This is just a job. This uniform is the way it is, so people know that that's your job. People will know that you are the police. This is why you wear it. But you're just regular men and women, and as they're marching past me, Steph, they are shedding tears like you or I. These are the same people you meet in the grocery stores. If collectively you went to your son or daughter's soccer game, you would see these men and women at these events as well, sitting in lawn chairs, cheering for the kids. These aren't superheroes. They're just people who do an extraordinary job. They're extraordinarily brave, braver than most, and they know that when they put that uniform on. And that's why it's so gut-wrenching when one of them falls. One of our community members falls, trying to keep our community safe. It breaks everybody's heart. It breaks my heart. It breaks the hearts of anybody who cares at all about society, about law, about order. And Steph, let me just real quick share you the story. Andrew's body was just driven past us just before we came to air. We saw the officers salute. His casket was draped in the Canadian flag. Just before the summertime, very quickly, I was stopped during rush hour in my CP24 truck, and I've been gone from the job for 5 years. And anybody who knows policing knows that when you're on the job, anybody who's of lower rank than you refers to you by your rank just out of respect. Period. That's it. It's not a lifetime rank. When you leave the job as a superintendent, you're not Superintendent Steve from here on in. You're just Steve. Well, I heard in the distance a big, loud, booming voice, "Hey, staff." The radio was on, air conditioning was on. I turned to my left, and there was Andrew, big 6'4" guy in uniform, big, beautiful smile, leaning on his motorcycle. And I rolled down my window and I said, "That's Mr. Staff to you." And he laughed and he said, "Hey, Mr. Staff, you be careful." And regrettably, I did not tell him to be careful. And I kind of nodded my head and I drove off. Now I share that story with you because that really shows you just how respectful of a man Andrew was, how much he loved the job, how much he respected the rules. And if you are a police supervisor, if you want to know how well your officer is interacting with the public, just keep your ear to the floor and listen to how that officer interacts with other officers. And that'll give you an indication as to how effective and how respectful they are out in public. And I can tell you, there is no better cop than Andrew, and he's going to be missed. This city's lost a good one, that's for sure. It's a sad day all around, Steph. It's a sad day all around. So back to you.
Well, Steve, while I have you there, I know that you've been speaking with some officials where you are, and you have a better idea of the people and the number of people in attendance today.
Yeah, that's right. I spoke with TPS personnel not too long ago, and they said there are 89 police services from across the continent. There are over 3,000 police officers, non-TPS, and there are 8,000 plus people expected to be in attendance here at this Congress Center today. That doesn't surprise me either. I mean, you and I and Mark have been talking about this throughout the morning. The manner in which Andrew died, when you put that uniform on, you know something could happen. You know that you're the one that gets that call, a shooting in progress, a robbery, a break and enter in progress. You're the first one on scene, and you're killed as a result. That is as a result of a radio call. Being executed because you're wearing a uniform and because you represent law and order, because you represent good over evil, being shot in the back because of that is an extraordinarily different story. So it's no surprise to me that there are so many police officers from around the continent here today to pay their respects, because every day a man or a woman puts a police uniform on, regardless of where they are, they run that risk of being executed just because of what they represent. But as Mark's been saying all day, these officers will have their time to grieve. The show's got to go on. Calls for service have to be answered this afternoon, this evening, into tomorrow. And many of these officers who may have taken the day off today to be here, they got to be back at work. No time to grieve. Put on that uniform, as brave as they are, and they go about doing their business. But no surprise that there's this many officers here. Just the manner in which Andrew lost his life in and of itself is enough to just cause shockwaves throughout law enforcement across the continent. This is why we're seeing so many police officers here today. Steph.
Well, Steve, thank you. And Mark, you know, to Steve's point, the day that this happened on Monday, a week ago Monday, every one of these police officers could have been involved in one way or another.
Oh, absolutely, because they've all been to a coffee shop. They've all had lunch, as every police officer in North America has. And as we said earlier, he was executed because of the uniform that he wore and what it represented. And we may not know any more than that. But when I look at all of these officers that, that are marching here now, I can guarantee you, Stephanie, that each and every one of them, or their partners, their spouses, got a phone call from somebody saying, is he okay? Is she okay? How are they doing? And I'm guilty of it, because I'll be quite frank with you. The first thing I did when I heard about this tragic incident is I texted Chief Raymer. And all I said was, are you okay? That's it. Because we know how it impacts everybody. And it's hard. And you cannot move away from it until we get to this point of the funeral now, where life will go on. For this last week and a bit, with the ongoing criminal investigations and all the other murders that took place during this horrible occurrence, it's difficult to escape it. You know, you go to work, that's all they talk about. You're in the car with your partner, that's all they talk about. In homicide, that's all they're talking about. And the same holds true in Peel, and Durham, and Hamilton, and the OPP. There's no escaping it. This is, and I hate the word closure, and I will not use the word closure, this is the end of a chapter. And then they're going to move on to the next chapter now. Because you don't get closure from this. You'll always remember this. And you know, and for young officers that have, you know, come on the job in the last year or two, this is their first experience with that. Their parents, it's their first experience. Their spouses, it's their first experience. An officer that I worked with was killed within about 6 months of me coming on the job. I had never envisioned what the risks were. You came on the job and you went to the police college and you went to Elmer and everything was fine and you know, you had great camaraderie. It never dawned on you that somebody you know could be killed. And then when that hits you, it hits you like a ton of bricks, and you never, ever forget it. And there's not an officer out there today that will forget this.
And Mark, do you have any recollection of a police officer in Toronto ever being targeted simply because they are in uniform?
No. I thought about it, and I've racked my brains. I've spoken to other homicide investigators that I've known for years. None of us can fathom or understand or find any scenario that comes remotely close to this type of situation. There's always some interaction, even if it's something as innocent as a traffic stop, or an officer being hit by a car when he stops a vehicle on the Don Valley Parkway. It happens. And police can wrap their heads around that. You can rationalize that and say, okay, I've been there. I can understand how this happened. It may be wrong, but I understand how it happened. This is unique, and it's different, and it's just almost impossible to fathom.
And you know, these funerals are poignant and heartbreaking, but does this situation make this day even that much tougher?
It does, because you can't understand it. Your mindset, there's a synapse between what happened and why it happened, and you cannot connect the two ends. It doesn't make sense, and it's just so tragic. And you know, now officers are going to be watching this casket coming out of the hearse, and you know, watch the faces.
Let's listen in for a moment.
Air party in park, turn. Air party, dress. Kill. Air party, prepare to feed. Feed. Air party, prepare to lift. Lift. Air party, prepare to lift. Lift! Air party, 8 paces. Inward close. March! Air party, 4 paces. Inward close. March! Air party, outward, turn! Air party, left, pivot! Air party, slow, march! In, out, in, out, in. Air party, halt. Air party, hold, march. In, out. party, out. Air party, in party, first. Air party, prepare to forward, forward. Air party, on head, south. Air party, southward, first. Air party, left. Air party, left, finish. Air party, low, march. Now, please. Shoulder up.